Welcome to Don't Quit on Me, the podcast series where we consider alternative ways to manage the inevitability of stress and pain. Through speaking with a wide range of people who share their stories, strategies, and perspectives, we aim to inspire hope, confidence, and the belief in the fact that things can get better no matter where you are. So who am I? My name is Nick, and I have a lived experience with depression, panic, anxiety, chronic pain, and migraines. I've been around mental health challenges for most of my life. I've also produced a CD and written a book which looked at my own recovery through these conditions. I thoroughly researched the strategies that I used in order to fully understand how and why I got better, and also how sustainable my recovery would be. I spoke to roughly 30 people in various fields such as nutrition, meditation, movement, exercise science, and reflective journaling, and basically presented the information as an affirmation that what I'd done had some substance. The Don't Quit on Me podcast series contains real conversations with real people who navigate difficult situations, and as such, some may find this content triggering. If this is you, then please turn off that episode and either choose to engage with a different one or find a different podcast that works for you. Also, if you find yourself in need of psychological or professional help, please look for and connect with someone that you can work with. There are a multitude of options available, and it's best not to suffer alone or in silence.
I stood there gently rocking, still in my work clothes, rhythmically transferring the weight from one foot to the other. My youngest son, cradled in my arms, was on the verge of sleep. For a 6-month-old child, he had an impeccably strong will. I had rocked him gently in his cot for over an hour before I picked him up. It was the usual battle of wills that I imagine will continue long into adult life. Tonight he had won, and yet I had won too. I had acted skillfully, meaning I hadn't lost my patience and raised my voice. I rolled with each moment, sensing what I needed to make happen, sensing that he had got to a place beyond tiredness, and he would need my help to journey to the land of sleep. He had won in getting me to pick him up and rock him. In essence, he craved the closeness, his torso visibly relaxed the minute that he was picked up and held. It's a feeling we all crave and pursue for most of our lives, and I suspect it's at the root of many of our actions. That sense of complete acceptance, the warmth of an embrace that gives completely and without judgment. In these nighttime hours, as children journey to the realms of dreams, they take on a serenity and beauty that transcends all the usual noise and activity that we get locked into during the day. Here, as his breathing began to settle and slow, I really began to appreciate him for the beautiful child that he is. I hummed along with the music, a CD of Tibetan chant, of the primordial sound Om. It was having the desired somniferous effect, and I joined in the chant gently so as not to wake him, and felt myself begin to relax and center too.
Lama Christopher is a lineage holder in the Dzogchen tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. For more than 20 years he studied and practiced intensively under the guidance of his root teacher, Lama Tenzin, as well as many other accomplished masters, both Himalayan and Western. Besides being committed to the authentic and accessible transmission of this timeless wisdom tradition, he's also a joyful parent and has enjoyed a professional career of 4 decades as a trusted legal and financial counsel. Lama Christopher teaches and guides meditation throughout the US and abroad, COVID permitting, and online. On a personal level, we're related as distant cousins, which I discovered roughly 20 years ago, a little bit over 20 years ago when I first came to Australia. So we've been in touch since then, but the conversation that you're about to hear is the first time that we actually spoke. So I hope you enjoy it nearly as much as I did, and that you find something useful in it. Lama Christopher Coriat, welcome.
Nick, wonderful to be with you.
What a privilege and a long overdue thing that had to happen.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to come and be
Not
with
at
you
all.
on your podcast. I love what you're doing. What I've seen of the work that you're doing is tremendous because it's so important these days.
Thank you. I think it came about having gone through severe depression, panic and anxiety previously, and having been with loved ones who've also gone through similar situations. And I said this to Stephen Hayes when we spoke, that I can see that stress levels are maintaining at least a steady keel, if not on the upswing. So the call seems to be to develop better skills for relating to it and working with it. And, you know, sharing that knowledge with the younger generations and us as well, so that we can relate to it better and not get overwhelmed by it.
I think that's one of the key things. I mean, this goes back 2,500 years to the teachings of the Buddha, that life is difficult, or at least the unenlightened life is difficult. The unawakened life is difficult. We find ourselves in the midst of difficulties that sometimes can feel overwhelming. And it is very positive and very uplifting to know that there are skills, there are ways that we can work with the mind and with the body to enhance our well-being and then to be of help to others. So it's very timely. It's always timely. I know sometimes it seems like this is a particularly tough time, and it has been for many and continues to be. But I think it's human nature, perhaps, to think that these are exceptionally tough times. And any sort of study of history will tell us that down through the ages, there have always been setbacks and joys, and that's the nature of life. So anything that we can do to help ourselves and each other to work through that and rise above that, I think is timely and well called for.
Excellent. You touched on a few things, and I'll avoid the temptation to dive straight in, but could I ask you to talk a little bit about how you came to Buddhism particularly?
Yeah, indeed. So it's a very central part of my life. As you pointed out at the beginning, I'm a Lama, which is only with one L. So that means I'm a kind of Buddhist minister, meditation teacher, spiritual director, and have been for now approaching 20 years, but teaching meditation, that is. I've been a Lama probably for 5 years. But how did I come to it? I was interested growing up in religion, the sort of fairly conventional, not too serious religious upbringing, although we went to chapel every day at school. And I was definitely interested in that, but approaching 20, kind of ran into a brick wall. I just couldn't make sense of some of the take it on faith, almost magical aspects of the church and the belief system. And so I put it aside and embarked on a different religion. I didn't really know it was a different religion at the time, but I spent the next 20 years practicing materialism, the belief that money and success can cure all ills, and it ain't necessarily so. Even with some money and some success, it seems like the problems still endure. And I was working a lot with people who had a lot of money and success. And it became apparent to me over that 20-year period that it was doing very little to help them with the difficulties that they faced in their lives and in their families and in their businesses. It doesn't help us, and it has a tendency, that pursuit of money and success has a tendency just to leave a huge hole in our wholeness. The heart is missing. And, that sort of existential angst, that uncomfortableness can be very destructive. It can lead us to all sorts of attempts at self-soothing, and it did for me, using behaviors that weren't going to do me any good to try and paper over that uncomfortableness with just the lack in my life of wholeness and completeness. So I was lucky at a sort of very low point in my life, in my early 40s, midlife crisis, if you want to call it that, with my marriage on the rocks, to connect with my principal teacher. I wasn't really looking for spirituality or Buddhism or anything, but I was looking for some better way or some way out of that hole. And he was clearly an example of the wholeness and completeness and positivity and encouragement that I was looking for and that I was glad to find. And at first I was quite skeptical because it didn't, it sort of didn't feel right. And I had this identity of somebody who's not into that kind of thing. But I gradually discovered that there was something there for me. And, 20 years later, I'm extremely glad that I did.
That's a beautiful story, and I can certainly resonate with a few points along the way. I know, I would have been about 30 the first time I discovered. Initially, it was kirtan through the yogic traditions, and Krishna Das came out to the Sunshine Coast, and just blew my mind. I again was very skeptical. I walked into a church hall and sang my heart out and felt closer to the people in the room than I had to many people in years over the space of a weekend. And I'd gone in deeply depressed and yet emerged 3 days later smiling. And I thought, I don't care how skeptical I am, there's definitely something to this.
Something is happening. Yeah. KD is wonderful. Krishna Das is he has so much heart. And as you say, you don't really need to know how it works, when it works. And you just sort of can't deny that something has happened, and you may not know exactly what it is. But he's a beautiful example of somebody who has devoted himself to the practice of a spiritual tradition in a way that is compelling for people who come into connection with him. And you don't have to worship somebody to recognize that perhaps they have something that they can pass along that is just uplifting and encouraging and beautiful.
Yes, yeah, so well put. It's a sense of coming home, which is bizarre because it was quite a long way from home, but definitely felt like I'd arrived. Could I ask you to talk a little bit about a time where practice, I guess in general, has helped you navigate a difficult time? And I suppose as an extension of that, on the importance of having a practice?
Yeah. So I've already mentioned that I was sort of pretty near bottom at the time when I first started meditating and exploring the whole possibility that just sitting and breathing and being might be a way of discovering something about ourselves that was always there, but simply not recognized, of tapping into our original goodness, if you want to call it that. And so, I was very motivated. I was in a deeply unhappy place, and throwing myself into a daily-ish meditation practice, sort of taking it quite intensively, if you like, and reading a lot about it, going on silent retreats, at first for a day or two, and then for a week or two, and then for a month or two, was, very powerful. And I could really sense, as you just mentioned so beautifully, that coming home in a way that made no sense rationally whatsoever, but just coming home to something truer and more aligned with goodness and wholeness. So it helped me tremendously at that time, and has throughout the last 20 years, and even over the last sort of 7 or 8 months. My wife Daniela, who is also a Lama, and I have been going through something together that's been tremendously difficult, a situation that we've had to handle, and we've both lent on our meditation practice and on each other, obviously. And fortunately, that's resolved, and delighted to be out of those woods. But, life doesn't necessarily stop getting difficult. It's lovely to think that, oh, it'll be blissful and everything will be fine and there'll never be any problems again. And, perhaps that's the naive idea we have about the possibility of waking up or of enlightenment or of freedom, whatever you want to call it, when we go in. But really, we're just looking to feel a little better. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially if we're depressed or we're desperate or hurting. And we can't really change what life throws at us, but we can learn to ride the waves a little bit better and perhaps rise above the waves, not get knocked about by them so much and coughing and spluttering all the time, as it were. And I think that's important. I think that possibility of navigating even really difficult circumstances, even perhaps the end of life, which is going to come to all of us at some point, navigating that in a way that is serene and positive, and whatever comes along, being able to ease into it is a tremendous blessing. That we shouldn't kid ourselves that means that nothing will ever go wrong again. It's really a way of coping with whatever comes along and being more at ease, less stressful. And I know that's something you've done a lot of work on, and it's so important.
I interviewed Katie for a book I wrote, about 11 years ago. And I probably was sounding a little bit evangelical in that I've navigated depression, I've beaten it, that's it, it's all done and dusted, now on to the next project. And I think he sensed that because he said, just understand, it's a process of going up and coming down, going up and coming down. And it's not that it's not going to happen again, which I didn't want to hear. He said, it's just going to be building an ability through practice to be able to sit with the difficult moments and not get swept away by them.
Yeah.
And, being able to enjoy the moments when they arise and not be too caught up in the difficult times to not appreciate the good ones.
And not riding that roller coaster of elation and depression that I think all of us to some extent are prone to, trying to get away from the lows and trying to go toward the highs. And it's really a surprising discovery, again, that pushing away what we don't like and trying to grab onto and hold onto what we like just, makes us sick and gives us rope burn, because it's always slipping through our fingers. And once we get used to the fact that the roller coaster may occur, but that we don't have to be so dragged along by it and so invested in it, really, that circumstances can arise and resolve without us being swept up and swept away and drowning in them. That's a real discovery.
Beautiful. Thank you. It's no secret, and we've hinted towards this already, that globally things are pretty tough. And I know that when I spoke with Stephen Hayes, he talked about that there is definitely a need for us to increase our skills in building, capacity to be able to sit with stress and work through it, as you just mentioned, by not being swept away by it. I know that Buddha had some specific perspectives on dealing with difficult times, suffering, and also the path out of suffering. Could I get you to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I think stress is a tremendous killer, as we're starting to understand scientifically. It just wreaks havoc on the body-mind continuum, and the two are much more interrelated than perhaps we knew until quite recently, and are still discovering. So that roller coaster that we were just talking about of stress and adrenaline is something that is damaging to us and harmful to us, and can lead us to unskillful actions that aren't necessarily helpful to us or to others. So what the Buddha recognized, and he just sort of did the exploration and experiment for himself 2,500 years ago, what he recognized was that there are difficulties and they're going to come along, and we can't necessarily stop them. And that's his first noble truth. Often perhaps not terribly well put as life is suffering. That's a mistake. That's a bad translation. That the more that the cyclic, conditioned way of getting swept up by circumstances, ordinary, the mundane way of going about life, is uncomfortable, is what he taught. That was his first recognition, or his first noble truth. He said the second was that's caused by our endless tussle with circumstances. I like this, I want more of this, I don't want that. Fighting with what comes along, trying to make it different. And as you said, the beautiful thing about his third and fourth noble truths is that he said, there is a way out, there is a better way, and here's the way. Here's how you might go about doing that experiment, that exploration for yourself. And you can see, and he was he wasn't very evangelical, to use the word you used, about it. He basically said, do the experiment for yourself, see how it works. And if it works for you, if this kind of thing seems to be going in a good direction, then you might want to pursue it. But don't take it just because I said so. And that was a beautiful message to me, that sort of empirical, okay, just do the experiment. You don't have to believe in something. Perhaps you have to have a little bit of confidence that other people have done this for 2,500 years and it's made a difference in their lives. So yeah, maybe that's a belief, but just invest a little bit of time. And he said, and things will get better, and they do. And I think that's why, for me, this has been an important path. Partly inspired by the fact that it's not something somebody just made up. It's been around for millennia, and people across different cultures have been practicing in this way and awakening in this way, and that makes a difference. So yeah, that to me was inspiring enough to put some energy and some effort into it. And I think the Buddha's teachings are the ultimate stress relief, if you like. When we're blindsided by something, is just to turn awareness back on itself and give ourselves a little bit of space, maybe take a breath and feel what we're feeling. Allow whatever arises to arise. Because often when something surprises us, we're so busy reacting, we're so busy, the fight or flight urge kicks in, and before we know it, we've responded in some way that perhaps isn't that skillful, or we're just crazed and don't know what to do and running around trying to think, oh my goodness, I got to do something. So if we can, as a result of having invested a little bit of time in a meditation practice, a sitting practice, in just allowing what comes up to come up, and as it will resolve if we don't mess around with it, we'll talk about that in a minute, then we have that skill, we have that ability when suddenly there's a crisis of some sort, a little one or a big one, whatever it may be, to be present and not thrown off, and to be open and clear, and to respond in a way that is not a knee-jerk reaction, which may not be the best thing in that moment for that circumstance, but in a way that is clear and wise and kind and effective. So that's why we practice, is to deal with those moments, because they're going to come up. We all space something out sometimes, and like get that message that says, you're supposed to be on a conference call 10 minutes ago. Yes. Where are you? Yes. It's happened to all of us.
That's it. And not going to that reactionary space of self-deprecation is a good way, not going there.
Absolutely. I think giving ourselves a break is one of the things that I learned early on, and my teachers were so kind and so compassionate that they gave me some confidence. I think one of the fundamental message of this, that we're all fundamentally all right, that we're naturally good and kind. Yes, we may be confused. Yes, we may have done things that we perhaps ought not to have done, or that we're not wise and kind. That doesn't make us at heart bad people. It just means we did unwise, stupid, maybe even bad things. But that there is a way through that. And that was a terribly important message. I think that message of unconditional acceptance just as you are, perhaps is the most precious thing that anybody can give to anybody else, whether it's a parent to a child, or a teacher to a student, or a friend to a friend. No matter what may be going on, no matter what you may have done, there is that acceptance. And, it can be hard to see that in ourselves. But there are practices that we can do, and the practice of loving kindness, going back to the Metta Sutra, at least 2,000 years ago, is one of them, and we can perhaps talk a little bit about that. There are great modern day practices derived from that and from modern research of self-compassion that I think are tremendously valuable. Christopher Germer at Harvard and Kristen Neff at University of Texas, Austin, have both done great research and written good books on self-compassion. And I think learning to cut ourselves some slack, to lower the bar a little bit on our sky-high expectations for ourselves, opens us to our own suffering, if you like, our own distress, and from that to, this is what so many others are going through. This is what everybody has to deal with on some level. And once we open to it ourselves, we can be a lot kinder to ourselves, and then we can sort of rise to the occasion more, and then we can help others. It's a little bit like putting on your own oxygen mask first and then helping others. It's surprising, and it isn't always the way that Buddhism is taught, or that other religions teach. There's a tremendous focus on the need to help others, and that's wonderful. But if we do that without really touching first into our own good heart and being kind to and forgiving ourselves and recognizing the basic goodness within us all, no matter what we may have done, if we don't do that first, then whatever we may do for others is a little bit artificial, because we haven't really felt our own pain and difficulty. We may think we're feeling theirs, but we're not really. It's more of an intellectual or a conceptual idea of what they may be going through. We haven't kind of touched into it through our own sufferings that may be slightly different from theirs. But being at peace with ourselves is key to being able to help others. And so I'm a huge supporter of loving kindness and self-compassion practices. And my teacher said, if you spent months or even years starting with offering loving kindness to yourself, before going on to those who are near and dear to you, and to strangers, and to even people you have difficulty with, which is the traditional sequence. But starting with oneself, it seems to have gotten left out until quite recently, and it is right there in the original sutra or teaching of the Buddha a couple of thousand years ago at least.
Thank you. I know personally I'll often go to social media if I reach a point in the day where I don't want to think anymore, or things become too challenging, and I want to check out for a moment. But I know, which is ironic, because I know it seldom leads to a greater sense of well-being. Normally I'll end up more anxious, more stressed, more distracted, and with less time. And I was listening to Ralph de la Rosa's book, The Monkey Meets the Messenger, where he mentions a study that looked at where when people are distracted from what they're doing by social media or whatever, it increases the overall feeling of dissatisfaction. So we seem to crave it know that it's not good for us, but continue to do it. And even that when we get a notification or a vibration on our phone, that our blood pressure spikes a tiny bit. Could I get you to touch on the concepts of false refuge, self-cherishing, and how they relate to our global fascination with things like social media?
Yeah, so I think this ties into what I was saying earlier about my experience and taking, all of the wrong roads to try and fill that existential angst, that hole in our hearts. There's been quite a lot of research written, I think, now, and I think Ralph de la Rosa is right on in a couple of ways. One, in that he's not making, as I understand, I haven't read his book, but I had a quick look. He's not making the mind the enemy, accepting of what comes up, and I think that's an important message to get across. That we're not trying to flatline the mind or to blank the mind or to get rid of thoughts, because we're never going to be able to do that. Becoming used to the way in which thoughts appear and left to themselves dissolve if we don't indulge in them and get caught up in them is a very important way of getting used to how the mind works and reducing stress. So I think that's an important message in his book. The second point that you mentioned, the way in which we resort to social media and we kind of get a hit from it, is very topical, very important for us to recognize right now. So part of it is that we're trying to fill that uncomfortableness, and we all do it. We all at times just fall into a kind of blank dullness that is not entirely comfortable, and we reach for something. And these days it's right at hand. It's our device. It's right there, never far from us. And it'll provide some, immediate seeming relief. And it's designed that way. There's a book, I think it came out a while back. Our son and I read it, called The Fix by Damien Thompson, who's a journalist in England. It's been quite controversial because it takes an approach to addiction that may or may not be entirely right. But he was right on about the way in which we are conditioned to use our devices, whether it's gaming, whether it's social media, whether it's just email, conditioned to come back again and again and to get that little hit of dopamine. And the research that Ralph de la Rosa is mentioning now is much more well known than it was back probably 8 or 10 years ago when Thompson wrote that book, The Fix. They are designed that way to trigger the pleasure receptors or neurons or whatever it is, way beyond me, in the mind. And they provide a little hit. But in the same way as heroin or cocaine or something like that seem to provide some instant relief, they then lead to a couple of things. They lead to a crash as you come down from them, and the desire to do it again or to get more. And we become habituated. So this is the process of conditioning that the Buddha described, but sped up to a degree that is now ludicrous. Our kids and ourselves are so stimulated by the media presented to us in all sorts of different ways from our screens constantly, news flashes, email, there's friends texting. It's constant, the input that we're receiving, and each little one is triggering us a little bit. And it leads us to want more and to go back more to that. And ultimately, it's unsatisfying. As you say, we're increasing our overall feeling of dissatisfaction because this kind of distracted, deluded, scatteredness is terribly unhealthy. And so again, some sort of sitting or meditation practice allows us to recognize that the mind in its natural state is beautiful, that the mind in its natural state is peaceful at any decibel level, not just if we flatline it, because we can't, but that it's actually peaceful in its natural state, allowing stuff to come up, but not necessarily getting swept up in it. So that enables us more clearly to recognize, oh, I can take a little bit of a holiday from my device for an hour and get on with some work, or listen to some music, or spend some quality time with my partner or my child or my parent. Not getting so distracted, so cut up by the constant barrage of information and entertainment and stimulation that's being thrown at us, quite frankly, for purely capitalistic reasons. I mean, I'm a supporter of the capitalist economy, but I'm also a supporter of government at times stepping in to say, you know, too much is too much, and you can't just run wild with everybody's minds.
No, you can't. And it is, I mean, that seems to be the new commodity, is mind space, people's attention. How liberating it is to realize that we actually do control it, and we do have some, you know, agency over where it goes, although it's difficult.
It is difficult. It takes a little bit of practice, which is why, you know, I think it is worthwhile investing a little bit of time each day. I find and have found now for north of 20 years that taking even a little bit of time out of the day to get used to just sitting and just breathing and just being is tremendously powerful in making me more effective, in making me less stressed out, in making me less distracted, and more able to consume wisely. You know, it doesn't mean I don't ever look at Instagram, or I don't ever read several sources of news and go a little deeper than perhaps I wanted to. But then I can catch myself, and I'm not an hour down the road, deep down some rabbit hole, nor am I stressed out by it, nor do I beat myself up as a result. So I think it equips us to deal with what modern life throws at us in a remarkable way, considering it's such an old tradition of contemplation and of wisdom. I think there are so many things competing for our attention, as you say. It's all about attention these days, and that touches into what you were saying about false refuge. These are all ways that sort of seem to be compelling, that sort of draw us in, but they don't really offer the kind of relaxation and the real reward of joy and peace and happiness that is there. It's already present. We're just usually elsewhere.
That's a beautiful point. So we spoke very briefly about loving kindness. Would you mind just talking, and self-compassion, but would you mind talking about that and what it is and how it can be a useful ally?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk about what it is, because I think often we conjure up an idea of loving kindness that is way too complicated and out of reach. Loving kindness in my lineage, my tradition is really very simple. It's the simple wish that someone be well and happy. It's simply wishing someone well. Now, that may be oneself, that may be someone else. There's not as much difference between those as we might think. So making the simple wish that somebody be well and happy is loving kindness. Compassion, sort of close relative, if you like, is the simple wish that somebody be free of suffering, that somebody be free of so that loving kindness focusing on the upside, wishing more happiness and joy for them. compassion, focusing a bit more on the downside, saying, may they be free of that difficulty that they're currently going through. And once we define loving kindness in that very simple, easy way, it doesn't have to be a certain feeling or feel a certain way. It doesn't have to challenge us to say, oh, am I kind enough? Am I loving enough? Was that a kind thought? It's simply making that wish. May that one be happy. May I be happy. May you be happy. May they be happy. And practicing that has a tremendous power, has a tremendous liberating joy to it that is quite beyond our logical, theoretical, knowledge-seeking approach. But if we try it and we accept that that's a way that's been passed down for a long, long time, just spending a little bit of time, as I said earlier, starting with ourselves and then moving on to those who are near and dear to us, for whom it might be quite easy to make that wish, maybe even easier than for ourselves. But we shouldn't overlook ourselves. Making the wish that they be well and happy comes very naturally for those who are close to us. And then we could go on to strangers. And of course, we don't necessarily have to tell them. It's a practice of allowing our mind to do what it naturally is inclined to do, if we would but let it, which is simply to make the wish that that one be happy, that one be freed of whatever difficulty they are going through. And so, getting back to hopefully normal here with vaccines and modern science getting us out of lockdown pretty soon, I hope, at least sometime this year, we will be back to meeting people. But even now, there are people who we talk to remotely. There are people who might be helping us in one way or another that we come into contact with. We can, even if we don't know them, if somebody delivers a package, or if somebody or we pass somebody in the street that we may not know them, we can make the wish that they be well and happy. And they don't even have to obviously be suffering for us to make that wish. May that police person be well and happy. May that postal worker be well and happy. May that other driver be well and happy. Whoever it is, we can make that wish, and it's tremendously freeing and encouraging and uplifting for us. Whether it has an effect on them, we shouldn't worry so much. This is a practice of freeing our mind so that we can be of more help directly to others.
I was trying to remain focused and not drift off to other questions that I wanted to ask you about then. But I think it is very, very potent to, especially when people go through difficult states of emotion, where there may be some self-loathing, to start offering that wish, even if it's not, it's going to feel counterintuitive initially, but over time has quite a miraculous effect.
It does indeed. It does indeed. And I think, there's power in offering oneself that wish and allowing some self-care, because so many of us simply don't acknowledge the importance of that. And there's also power in turning ourselves outwards. One of the quickest ways, I think, to lift our spirits and to be less sort of down and concerned with ourselves. Obviously, if somebody is deeply depressed, then they may need professional help, and that's readily available now in so many ways. But any form of feeling down, feeling a little under the weather, depressed, is often alleviated if we can simply think of and start wishing well to someone else, or even do something for someone else. The power of service to others is tremendous. And if that's combined with some loving kindness for oneself and practice of what we've been discussing, then that's a tremendously powerful combination. The loving kindness for oneself prevents burnout, which can otherwise occur if we're totally self-sacrificing and focused on helping others. Burnout is not an uncommon result of that because we haven't taken adequate care of ourselves. But if we combine the practice of helping others in whatever little ways we can, or even just of wishing them well, with the practice of doing the same for ourselves, just as if we were another being, we are just as deserving of love and compassion. That protects us against burnout and enables us even more to be of help to others. So it's a virtuous circle.
Thank you. Last question. I was wondering, I know that there will be many people who'll be listening who might just be coping each day and literally putting one foot in front of the other. Is there a short practice for intense periods of stress that you would feel comfortable leading us in?
Certainly, yes, I would. What I'd say is that, just as a quick preliminary, that if you're that way inclined, it can be very helpful to bring to mind a source of encouragement or support. A refuge, we call it in Buddhism, but it doesn't have to be thought of that way. It's really just somebody or something that represents in recovery what we would say a higher power, a source of encouragement and support. It can be somebody you know, it can be somebody you think of, it can be an ideal or an icon or just wisdom and kindness itself, that sense of wholeness and completeness, if you can tap into that, whatever it may be for you, having some sense of something beyond little old me as a source of encouragement and support is tremendously powerful.
What follows is a short meditation. If you're driving, please switch off and listen to this when you can sit comfortably, and it won't matter if you're not paying attention.
So, to do a little bit of practice, and my tradition is really about practice. You know, we can talk about theory a lot, but just thinking about it intellectually doesn't always help. But doing it can be a tremendous help. So if we find a comfortable place to sit, doesn't have to be in a particular way, just a comfortable chair or cushion, and bring to mind, if you like, a source of inspiration or of encouragement. Eyes can be closed or open as you like. You don't have to visualize anyone or anything. Just recall someone who for you represents, in this moment, spiritual warmth, acceptance. And with them smiling on you, encouraging you, you can just allow the body to embody you. Being embodied. However the body feels, however it looks, fine, just as it is. Coming home to the body. Perfect embodiment, just as you are. And then letting the breath breathe your body. Letting the breath come and go, ebb and flow, as it will. No special way of breathing. Just sitting, just breathing. Being breathed. So coming home to the body and the breath. And third, to just being. Letting all experience come and go as it will. Naturally. Mind like the sky, vast, spacious. Unharmed by whatever momentarily appears in the body-mind continuum. Simply letting everything come and go as it will. Letting be. Letting the whole great procession of experience proceed unhindered, moment by luminous, shining moment. And if the mind wanders off, as it will, into the tangled jungle of thoughts and ideas, celebrate recognizing that. Smile if you like, that little awakening, and come back to just sitting and just breathing and just being. Nothing to do, figure out, or achieve for now. Simply at home and at ease in the vast, spacious, open, sky-like nature of being. And then, if you like, you can dedicate the power of the practice to the well-being of all, making the wish that it may uplift oneself and all others, not hoarding the benefit for ourselves, but sharing it happily with each and every other being. And then as we re-enter post-meditation, otherwise known as ordinary life, we can allow as much of that presence, as much of that immediacy as possible to come along with us. We can be present in every moment, no matter what we're doing, at any decibel level. So turning down the volume for a little while, as we just did, to get used to that, to sit and breathe and be, and allow experience simply to roll onwards without getting either into pushing it away or into indulging it and getting caught up in it, that enables us then more and more to go out into daily life with that same view, that same stance of being fully present and therefore active and involved and able to respond, and yet not caught up in our habitual ways of thinking and of doing and of reacting.
Thank you. Thank you. There's no greater reflector of how present I am than my youngest. She'll often tell me that you're not here, are you?
Isn't that the way? How old is she?
10.
Yep. Yeah. That'll do it. Yes, kids are wonderful like that. They're totally switched on to whether we're there or not, and they're also, as I was talking with one of my students today, and he's got a little girl, 5 months old. I said, just you wait. They can be great at pressing your buttons as well, because they know where all those buttons are. So practice is one of those things that helps us to be a much better parent, because we can be present no matter what they find to throw our way, and bless them. They always do.
Yes.
We have a grown up. He's my stepson actually, but I regard him as my son. And one of the great joys of our life is that he had a rather eclectic religious upbringing. In that one side of his family, his biological father's side of his family, was Jewish, and his grandparents on his mother's side were Catholic, and we're Buddhist, and so he had all sorts of things going on as he was growing up. But in his 20s, he's from university onwards, he's now 26, I think. He's sort of become a serious meditator, and has just started leading some groups. So that's kind of an indicator to me, because we never really made a thing of it. That's just what we were, and he knew that was going on, but never really took much interest in it growing up. But it was wonderful for us that he kind of came to that on his own, and said that that he never really realized at the time. He probably thought it was a bunch of nonsense, but he's really found that it makes a difference in his own life, and I think that makes it worth trying for all of us. Is that and if it doesn't work for you, then may you find something else that does. But for so many of us, this has been a life changer.
Mm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can attest. Mm. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm so grateful.
You're very, very welcome, Nick. It was wonderful to spend time together and to talk about this. I mean, it's beautiful that we have this shared connection. My sister, who died young, sadly, in her 20s, I discovered quite recently, became for a time very involved in Tibetan Buddhism, and spent some time in Scotland with Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who was one of the pioneers of Tibetan Buddhism in the West. And it's surprising to me that there are some of our family, far flung as they are, all of whom have come to this in one way or another. And I'm not saying, which brand but and I think it's something that for all of us is there somehow, and it's just waiting for the right spark to awaken it in us. And as you so beautifully described with Krishna Das, often when we least expect it, something touches into our heart and shows us that there might be a way we hadn't thought of that could make a difference in our lives. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
I'd love to. Lama Christopher Coriat, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick. All the best.
If you'd like to reach out, you can get me on Twitter at don'tquiton_me. Thanks for listening to the Don't Quit On Me podcast. If you'd like to get in touch to say good day, to appear on the show or suggest a guest appearance, or to offer support, You can reach me on Twitter at don'tquiton_me.